What are the commonalities among leaders who sustain excellence over an extended period of time?
Let's bring him in. Dan Cederholm, it's so good to have you here on the Learning Leaders Show. Welcome, man.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Ryan. Appreciate it. It's an honor.
Yeah,
really.
well, that's cool. That's great to hear. We were chatting beforehand, and one of the things I told you that I really value is diversity of thought, is talking to leaders who lead in all different ways, industries, and I have a particular penchant for creatives and for designers. And it may be weird. I think of Scott Belsky, who's another great one, but I maybe it's because I'm particularly not that skilled at it, but I love to be. So I really put you on this really high pedestal. And we'll talk a little bit about design for sure, but I also want to talk about leadership with you because you've done both. And that's why I'm glad to have you here. But Dan, I think you realize and you know that I am fascinated by leaders who have sustained excellence over an extended period of time.
Sure.
You are one of those people. You've also surrounded yourself with others. You've built a community of people like that over the years, more than a decade. So I'm curious from your perspective, when you analyze that, what have you found to be some of the common behaviors of leaders who have sustained excellence?
Yeah, great question to kick it off. I mean, for me, everything's always been a learning experience, and sometimes I don't even realize how I get to where I am at the next step until I step back and kind of really take some time to look at what happened. And I kind of have done that recently with after stepping away from Dribbble, um, which I co-founded 10 years ago. And I think that's a really good question. Sustained excellence. I think for me it comes down to a few different things. I think one is people, and that could mean a variety of different things. I mean, one is like hire good people, which is kind of like, sounds common sense and almost ridiculous, but true. People that you can get along with, you can work with, not just work, not just looking at the resume, but also just like personality. I find like personality was like 90% over uh quote unquote talent on paper, right? um and I also think like taste. You mentioned at the top, like you're a fan of design, creativity, but maybe don't have the skills, which may be arguable actually. But I think that taste is like super important, and that's sort of at the top, because you can't learn good taste, right? That's something you just I feel like you just have. I mean, you could maybe learn a little bit of it, but I feel like if someone has good taste and can recognize that one thing is more appropriate or better than the other thing, that's something that's super valuable. And because you could teach someone how to code or use a design application or whatever. You can learn those skills along the way, but the taste part is really um something that's sort of, it's like a magic sauce, I feel like, for somebody.
Can you describe,
Yeah.
can you define taste? I mean, it sounds funny to say this,
Yeah.
but what do you mean by like, when you use like, oh, he's got good taste? Like what does
Right.
that mean?
Well, I think it's the ability to evaluate multiple options and know which one is the right direction. And sometimes there are multiple directions, right? There's no one answer for anything, especially when it comes to design and creating stuff. But I feel like someone that's able to recognize, you know, things that are appropriate, on brand, um, something that will work rather than fight against what you're trying to do. I feel like that's somewhat taste. I mean, you could go back to like, if someone likes good music or good art, or And that's all subjective in a way, but I feel like in a team environment where you're building something and creating something together, there is like a mission, like a goal that you're trying to get to, and someone that can understand that goal and keep that in mind when choosing different um, options to go. I feel like it's super critical, and it's like not something. It's hard to teach. It's hard to learn that in a classroom or whatever. Um, I feel like taste is like, I don't know. It's something that's just inherent in the personality.
When you are, as you built Dribbble, you're building a team, you're having to make hiring decisions.
Yeah,
And we already talked about that people was the number one thing you mentioned when it comes to a leader who's able to sustain excellence.
yeah,
In your book 20 Bits, I learned about design, business, and community. There are two critical bits that deal with people. One, which is the number 4 in the book, is choose your partner wisely, and 2, which is number 15 in the book. So I'm just sharing a bunch of numbers right now.
yeah,
People and relationships are what's most important. And so
yeah.
let's, maybe we can merge those two for the purpose of this question. What first, when you're looking to partner with somebody, because there are people now who whether they're starting a business or they work within a company and maybe they need to partner with another leader in order to get something done. And so choose your partner wisely is very important. And we could even talk about separately, like from a marriage perspective, which is a whole other topic that I obviously agree is super important.
Yeah.
But from a work perspective, when you think about choosing a partner, what are some of the key must-have attributes in that person?
Yeah, great question. And I've sort of have thought about this a lot since founding Dribbble with my friend Rich Thornett. I mean, we were good friends first, and I think that was super important. And I don't necessarily think you have to be best friends to start a company together, but it certainly helps a lot, because there is a lot of trust that you have to have in that person. And so I would say trust and friendship. Um, you mentioned marriage. It is like a marriage. I mean, co-founding a company, I feel like is very much like a marriage. And I went through a divorce in real life, so like I kind of know. I unfortunately uh, how similar it is, and how communication, right, is the root of everything. Good communication is the root of any good partnership. So, um, you know, friends, similar values, and I don't just mean like corporate values, but maybe even personal values. Um, I feel like a lot of the work, and I've learned this over the years, and how personal work is. Um, Even design work or business, I feel like it's all personal. And I think that's one of the things that resonated with me when I sat back and looked at all this stuff. Um, and that's, I think good businesses are personal, and reflect, and the ones that are successful and the ones that I admire are often ones that have a are, have a personality. And aside from just the business goals, there's a personal aspect to it that's positive. Um and so I think in terms of other qualities, um you know uh let's see, what's the word I'm looking for? Skills, right? Skills that mesh together, right? So for Rich and I, this was really important to the way we were able to create the company, just the two of us. And for a while it was just the two of us, probably for longer than it should have been. But because our skills mesh so well, like I was more on the design side, the creative side, Rich back end programming, product design. He kind of actually he's way smarter than I am, so he filled in a lot of gaps. But the fact that we kind of between the two of us had a lot of the bases covered was really really valuable for us in terms of building a product, just the two of us, quickly, and being able to bootstrap the company, and not have to hire, initially not having to hire people that could do all the different things that we do. So I feel like multifaceted skill sets are good for finding partners. And I feel like, not partnering with someone that's just like yourself, I think is a good thing. I think if it was like, one thing I learned, and this goes with marriage too, right? You kind of over time you learn what each person's quirks are, and what their personality is, and eh, you know I think that understanding that as much upfront before you're actually getting into a business with someone is crucial. um and so in the book I talk about how important it is to choose your partner, because even if it's a side, I mean, Dribbble started as a side project. We did not start with a business plan or this anything like that. However, it did become a business, and so
Can you describe what Dribbble?
grown-ups.
Can you describe what Dribbble is and like the community
Yeah.
aspect of? Yeah.
Yeah, sure. So Dribbble is a community for designers, so graphic designers, web designers, typographers, icon designers, that kind of stuff. All creative folks, being able to share their work, get hired, and promote themselves. Sort of like a social portfolio-esque site that that has grown into a big community, for designers to find work, to connect with other like-minded folks, um, and that's kind of, that was a happy accident in a way, because initially it was like I just wanted to see what my friends and colleagues were working on, and I wanted to give them a platform to share little snippets of what they were doing, and selfishly, like, I just wanted to want to look over the shoulder of these people that I admired. And at the time there wasn't, Instagram, or Facebook was just starting, that kind of thing. I think Flickr was like the big photography site at the time. And so it was the right place at the right time. But starting that, as a side project, and not having a business plan right off the bat, I think I got lucky in terms of founding it with Rich, someone who I was friends with, where our skills meshed well. At the same time, it wasn't easy. I think, as you grow, if you're together with someone for 10 years on something, it's not all fun and games. It's learning those quirks of the other person, learning their personality, learning where each person can be most effective in the business, and being flexible about that is super important.
Number 15's people and relationships are what's most important, which is a little bit of a piggyback off of that first one. But Dan, I interviewed Jim Collins, who wrote Good to Great, and Great by Choice, a lot of good books. And I was kind of going on and on about what I was doing and why I was doing it, my passion behind it. And he kind of stopped me and he said, Ryan, those things are important, but what's most important is your who. Who will be your friends? Who will you surround yourself with? Who will those people that will be in your life? That will be the single greatest determining factor in your long-term success.
Absolutely.
And when I see you write people and relationships are what's most important, it's taken me back to that moment where it's changed kind of the way I think about my friends and my mentors and the people I help and just the people in general in my life. And so I'm curious, as you've had time now to reflect and you've documented the fact that this is what's most important, can you share more about people and the relationships you've built along the way and why those are everything to you?
Yeah. Oh, it's totally true. And It's funny. I when I was reflecting on this, I was looking back at, the work I've done, and a lot of it was freelance. So I started as a freelance designer, working with a lot of different companies and a lot of different projects. And I was looking back at my portfolio, and it was like, you know, everything was gone, that I had worked on over the last 20 years or whatever it is. Uh, like literally gone. Like a lot of it was web design work, digital work, and it disappeared. And because it's pixels and things redesign and things move on and things are canceled. And I was also thinking about like all the stress that went into those projects and how important it all seemed at the time, and how um, there were big, launch parties with champagne and stuff. And then, the thing is just not even around anymore. The company's gone. And so anyway, it was sort of like this philosophical moment for me. Like, wow, like this just not everything's gonna be here, and it kind of, you can take that a step further and be like, well, that's true for everything, really. Not to get dark on you, but so I was like, all this stuff's gone, but what's left after that are the relationships that I've made, and the people I've met through this business and career, and how important all of those relationships are, and not only to furthering my career, but also just life in general. And meeting people that are good people. And I use in the book, I use one example of like, I was I worked on a site called Odeo. This is a long time ago. It was a podcasting site before it was really termed podcasting, I guess, but uh, run by Evan Williams and
Twitter.
Twitter, exactly. So I was working on Odeo as a designer, just freelance designer. They're in the Bay Area. I'm up in here in Boston, and um, you know, Evan Williams had launched Blogger and sold it since, and so he's had a great success with that. But I remember after we finished up Odeo, he said, "Yeah, I got an email, and it was like, hey Dan, we're working on this new thing. The same team is working on this thing called Twitter, like TWTTR." And he sent me that first logo, which was actually pretty hideous, that they used for a while. And I remember thinking, like, I was like, yeah, no, I'm just too busy, man. Sorry, I can't can't design this. And just like, wow, like what a missed opportunity. But it also reminded me, like, whoever you're working with or dealing with in business and in life too, but kindness matters hugely, right? Um, the kind of person you are to work with matters hugely. Like, and you never know who you're working with today that could lead to some other great project down the road. And so that was a huge reminder for me. It's like, geez, anybody I work with, I'm going to be kind. I'm going to try to be the best coworker I can be, whether that be temporary or not. Because you just never know who you're, and this has happened, with other things in my life too. It's just, it's all about networking, and you can't network if you're kind of a dead end, and by being, I don't mean by being a dead end, I mean by being someone difficult to work with, and not, no one's going to want to work with a dead end. So
Yeah.
that was a serious lesson for me.
Well, yeah, I can imagine. And it's really amazing how far ahead you can get by just being pleasant and easy to work with.
Yeah, totally.
You know what I mean? I mean, just kind of showing up when you should be there, and being kind and ready to go, and doing your work, making sure you at minimum or achieve expectations, hopefully exceed them. That alone, and you have a consistency about you where you do that, can be a great mechanism for building quality relationships, because you're like, oh yeah, he's good to work with. You know,
Yeah.
sometimes it's as simple as that. He does good work, obviously, but he's just good to work with too. You know, those things are they're maybe
Absolutely.
undervalued skills.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, because there's no shortage of creative people out there. I mean, this
Yeah.
is people that are able to do the job, right? There's countless people.
Yeah.
But the extra sauce there is and this goes along with the taste thing I was talking about earlier. Like, so I feel like if you've got good taste and you're good to work, nice to work with, you're kind, you're a good person, you're friendly, you show up on time, like you said, that is the stuff that sets people apart and makes excellent team members, people that want to work with you, so on and so forth.
Well, you focused on, and this is something that I'm a huge proponent, regardless of this is number 18 in your book, but regardless of where you work or what you do, I am constantly pushing people I work with, clients, people, friends, whoever, to write, teach, and share
Yes.
publicly
Yeah.
while they're learning, while they're working. I found,
Yeah.
I mean, that's what my podcast has gone on for more than 5 years, and
Yeah.
there's some terrible episodes sprinkled throughout.
Oh, I'm sure.
But you
I'm
could
sure they're
hear,
not. But
you can literally hear the learning happening. You could hear improvement over time. But the greatest networking tool of my life has been publishing every Sunday night at 7:00 for 5+ years.
yeah.
Doing that has then attracted the type of people I want to hang out with. Like, you're one of them now, right? You saw like, oh yeah, I'd like to do that. And there are a lot of great interactions and relationships I've built because I've learned in public and I've published it. And there's countless other examples. You're one of them as well. Can you share, wow, again, this doesn't mean whether you're a creative or a designer. I'm saying if you are a person in general,
right.
write, teach, and share while you're learning in public, and share the value of all people doing that.
Yes. Oh, you couldn't agree more with all of that. I mean, it's the reason I got anywhere in my career, is because I shared as I was going. And I feel like the biggest thing, and I wish I had known this earlier in life, is that you don't have to be an expert to teach or share. In fact, that could be an advantage to in some ways. I feel like, the kind of things that I like to learn through, whether it be online or book or whatever, videos and things, if I'm learning a new skill, often the people that have just learned it, or are not experts, are the ones that are most fun to watch and interesting. And so early on for my career, like, I was sharing my learning of web design as I was going along, and I heavily blogged about what I was learning, and I'd even ask questions. I would pose questions about things that I wasn't sure about, and people would help, and there was a sense of community, of everybody helping each other. And that, I feel like that helped me find my way in the world, by writing and also taking chances. Like, I dropped out of college, so like, I'm not even I'm not an expert in anything. I'm not even versed in anything officially. So like, I feel like by sharing while I was working, I was getting the help of other people that were experts in these things, and it really helped. It just is such a help to me. And yeah, I just I can't emphasize that more, in terms of, don't be afraid to write about whatever topic you want, and post, and just be out there. Like you said earlier, like, you're posting your episodes, just showing up and doing that consistently. Persistence is huge. I remember talking to Debbie Millman. I got to interview her for the Dribbble podcast. This is years ago, and she's wonderful, and she's an amazing designer. Has done, logos for huge companies, and just had a great career, and then started a podcast, Design Matters. And she's just been, someone was like, how did you get to where you were? How did you get so popular with your podcast? She's like, I've been doing this for like a decade or something, consistently. And at first it was like, nobody knew about it, and you build it, and she just kept doing it. Persistence. And learned a ton along the way, just like you said. I think that I one of the, like, those hurdles of like, well, I'm not a podcast host, so I can't do a podcast, or I'm not an author, so I can't write a book. And I feel like the older I get, the more I realize, like, if everyone said that, there'd be no, no one would share anything, because oftentimes the difference between someone that hasn't done X and someone that has is just taking that little leap at the beginning and learning as you go. So
exactly. I would hate it if the Wright brothers would have said, well, obviously I can't fly a plane. Nobody's ever done it before.
Exactly.
We're not talking about building something for the first time. We're talking about doing things that have been done, but doing it in your way. And I think you're so right too.
Yeah.
When it comes to consistency, that doesn't mean there's not quality. I do think you got to have both, and you do have to show progress and progression, and that you're getting better.
Absolutely.
But it also, though, leads me to a quote that you've put on your website that I think is it's funny, I'm going to say, is useful for us to think about, and that is one of your mottos is be genuine and useful. And there's a classic quote from the Shaker tradition of furniture makers that sums up the goal nicely. Don't make something unless it is both necessary and useful. But if it is both necessary and useful, don't hesitate to make it beautiful. I love that. I had one of a great maker named Adam Savage, and when I was doing my prep for Adam's episode and doing my work for us talking, there were some things that you reminded me of Adam, as far as being a master maker and caring about beauty and caring about usefulness and caring about being authentically yourself and genuine. And so I'd love for you to share that you don't put a ton on that about page, but that's at the very top. So it obviously means it's very important to you. Talk to me about how not just you, but anybody could use the ethos of being genuine and useful, and then beautiful too. Because I think that's helpful as well.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you brought that up. And also, first of all, Adam Savage of Mythbusters.
Yeah.
Oh man. Okay. Wow. Well, I'm flattered. He's amazing. So, I mean, be genuine and useful. I've kind of I love using that, and the Shaker quote is a big one for me. And I think that goes back to, like, there's art. There's a difference between art and design, and I feel like, with art, you can, the framework is whatever you want it to be. I mean, you could just make something beautiful, and that's fine. I think in terms of making products, and I think that's where I apply this to, and the Shakers with their furniture do this as well, is, think about function and usefulness first, and then apply, the beauty. And I feel like that order of creation is really great, and it goes along to, like, so many successful things. I feel like, I mean, the obvious ones like Apple and Braun and Dieter Ram's stuff, and like, just the idea that you can make something that's both really useful and actually beautiful to use and to look at. And that's sort of become my ethos with just creating stuff, I think, is and some of that's like convincing myself of that too, and trying to remind myself that, no, don't get hung up on design trends and the way you think things should look or act, or um, just a reminder for myself to be like, well, what's the purpose of this first? Let's nail that, and then worry about how it looks, how it acts. So I just it resonates with me, being genuine and useful.
Did you no, I love it. For adventure.co.
Yeah.
I'm scrolling on it right now. Actually,
Oh, cool.
Did you design all of this?
Yes. Yep.
So everything in here is your design. One of the things, and this may be inside baseball and people don't care about, but I actually had a conversation with a friend of mine who lives in Columbus named James Clear, and James wrote a book called Atomic Habits. It's cool to see him go from just like a blogger to a guy who sold 2 million books in a year, which is insane.
Holy moly.
Yeah,
that's incredible.
Pretty awesome. He's been on New York Times bestseller list for a year, not a week, but a year.
Wow.
But anyway,
wow.
I said, James, your website it's like a minimalist website. It's just jamesclear.com, and the font is just, it's really nice. It's easy to read. And he said, you wouldn't believe the amount of time I spent studying the most readable font. Yeah, that's how you pronounce it. Those readable fonts ever to make the experience of my readers as good as it could possibly be. It needs to be beautiful. It needs to be simplistic. And when I look at your site, you got some cool pictures as well as that. And I just think it's good to kind of go inside the mindset as somebody is building something, a maker has built something. So maybe we could deconstruct your mindset as and I know I didn't prompt you that I was going to go here, but I'm just curious about this, because how you think about the building of something really is fascinating to me. So maybe you could share your thought process through putting adventure.co together.
Yeah. Great question. I think that you mentioned James' site, like, it's so simple, and I think sometimes people don't realize how much time goes into making something simple. I feel like simple, like getting too simple is like often not simple at all. I think sometimes the best designs are in a way like invisible and not noticed as much, right? Because if it's not flashy and bold, then maybe for the untrained eye, it seems like it's not a lot of thought went into it, when sometimes that's the opposite. So anyway, but I love simplicity, and I strive for that all the time. What can I take away, and oftentimes that's what I'm doing. When I'm creating something, I'll get in the zone and I'll start messing around, and then I'll be happy with it, and then I'll sleep on it and wake up and go, what the hell was I thinking? This is terrible. Like all of this stuff is unnecessary except for like one little piece, and I'll take all that other stuff away and I'll focus on that one little piece, and that maybe evolves into what's actually released, whether that be a shirt or a logo or whatever it is. So I think with adventure, for me, it was like I wanted a platform to just create stuff, and I wanted to get back into making physical things too, not just designing pixels that are going to go away, but things that'll last a little longer. And so it was like this almost fictitious tongue-in-cheek company that I decided to create, where I could design different things that are sort of semi-outdoor related, but it pulls together, for me, it pulls together a whole bunch of different interests together in one place, whether it be design and web and outside stuff and making physical products. And I mean, so your question, I'm rambling, but your question about process, I'm trying to think. My process is horrible. I'll admit it. It's awful.
But let's deconstruct it, and then maybe it's not.
Yeah, I mean, so
And
it's
maybe it is. I don't know.
maybe it is. That's true.
Yeah.
And I think that right, the older I get, maybe the less critical I am in my own process, because I'm like, well, geez, I don't know. This is it works, enough for me, but I feel like it's super inefficient, and I sometimes rely on tools that I've have been using for years, and I know there's better tools out there now that kids are using to, for instance, like design, like graphic design, or I'm still using Photoshop for most things, and using vector tools, but Photoshop. Um, and I think that a lot of my process is trial and error, and I'll just throw stuff at the wall privately, and then uh, see what sticks. And it takes me a long time to get there. A lot of sleep, a lot of like nights sleeping on something and looking at it in the morning and deciding that's crap. And then finally you wake up one morning, okay, this is actually good.
Yeah.
And I think I'm sure I'm not alone there. I think there are some people that just kind of nail it the first time, and they're like incredible people. I don't know. They probably have a lot of free time on their hands. But for me, it's just like constant iteration, constant trial and error, um, and constant self-doubt.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I have, it's typical to have imposter syndrome as a creative person, or not, or just a person that runs a business or leads something, right? Is just constant imposter syndrome, which I think is a healthy thing to have. I finally realized, like, if you don't have imposter syndrome, then you might be a little bit conceited and not see some things that you should. So I'm constantly like self-doubting myself, and uh wondering if am I qualified to do this. The best things that the most successful things I've done, I feel like, have been the leap of like, well, I'm probably not qualified, but screw it, I'm gonna try it anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And if it fails, I'll have learned a ton, and I'll know to move on to something else. But not being afraid to fail, I think, is something you gradually learn as you get older. I wish I knew this when I was younger, because when I was younger, I was just focused entirely on music, and I wanted to just play music, and ignored everything else, and ignored some other interests that I had. And I can't be a designer. That's someone that goes to school for 20 years and learns that, or I'm not a photographer, so I'm not gonna, a lot of self-doubt in my life, before. This is turning into like a therapy session. It's great. But but I feel like the older I get, the more I realize, like, that failure is not necessarily always a negative. And it's it's a learning experience, and you can take a lot out of failure.
Yeah.
And it helps you weed out what you can do, and what you want to do, and what you're happy doing.
I want to talk a little bit about writing, just in general. So Dan, there are people watching, listening, that work within a big company, and they're leading a team. And part of the job of leading a team is how they communicate with that team, both within the company and maybe outwardly on tools like LinkedIn or any social networking tool, about their style in which they communicate, what they write, the content, and maybe the email they send to their team on Monday morning to talk about our intention or what we're going to do, and maybe some of the strategy. And I found, unfortunately, like, even this is such a critical skill to develop, yet it's never discussed. There's no training for it in corporate America, hardly ever talked about, but we email constantly. We open a meeting every week. We have to be a public speaker every Monday in a lot of cases, or whatever the day is. We have to give presentations. We have to do the quarterly business review. Yet there's hardly ever any training on being a great writer and on presenting. And
Yeah.
I enjoy your writing. It's obviously whether it's on your websites or your book. Can you talk to me about the importance of writing and maybe even a way to get better at it? Because I think it's a critical skill for leaders to develop.
Yeah. Oh, I couldn't agree more. I think, yeah, two things that I wish I had learned, earlier is yeah, writing and oddly typography, which would be the
Mhm.
the visual representation of writing, I guess. And yeah, I feel like oh geez, I'm gonna plug in my power cord. That's another skill, is to always be plugged in. Yeah, so writing, I mean, gosh, I feel like oop, did I lose you?
You're
You
good.
still there, Ryan?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, you
good.
good. Yeah.
Yeah, so I feel like for me, it was like I learned by just practicing, and we talked a little bit about this before in terms of like sharing as you're learning and using that as a teaching moment. Um, because I dropped out of college, I didn't really have any official writing class aside from like high school, and so
Mhm.
I think that the blogging for me was huge. It was just a way to practice writing every day, and as much as I wanted to, I could write about whatever topic it was and learn that way. Um, you know, when it came time to write books, I feel like it was super intimidating, and oftentimes I would just push the idea aside because, well, geez, why should I be able to write a book? I'm not a trained writer. Um, and then I realized, well, I started doing it, but editing is key. Having a great editor is absolutely essential. And I realized in the process, in terms of making books, editing it can turn anyone's writing into something that's actually digestible. All right, not everybody has an editor, obviously, and not
Mhm.
everyone's going to write a book with editors, but um, uh, that sort of once I realized, I feel like that anyone can write, anyone can be an author, whether that be a book or article or whatever it is, or even like you said earlier, like meeting notes, just any kind of communication it's you're right, you were absolutely right in that it's the most critical thing to learn because it's the basis of the communication of everything we do. um how I'm a little stumped on what's my advice for people. How do you get better at it, right? Is that
Mhm.
what you were asking initially?
Yeah, I would
Yeah.
imagine part of it too for you is it's like a lot of things. One is to bring it to the front of your mind that it is important.
Hmm.
Sometimes when I ask a question about
Yeah.
excellence, one of the answers is well, you first have to value excellence. I would say you have to probably value developing
Yeah.
communication skill,
Yep.
especially considering that you have to do it all the time. And so probably the act of whether it was blogging for you or
Yeah.
writing books, just this almost the simple act of the repetition was critical. I think forced consistency has to be important. And then the editor part is while we don't all have editors for our books or whatever it is we're doing, we all, though, can seek out great writers and say, what do you think?
Yeah.
How can you help me? How could this be better? Where am I going wrong? Or how could I start? Whatever.
Absolutely.
Like, I
Absolutely.
think for me, I don't necessarily look for writing teachers. I look for great writers and then I go
Yeah.
ask them,
Yeah.
and then try
Right.
to deconstruct
Right.
their process. And then they can look
Yeah.
over mine and say, oh,
Totally.
this is, I mean, it's funny. Like I read a book called Endure by Alex Hutchinson, I remember, and the beginning of that book is beautiful. Like he just sets the stage of what he's writing about, and the metaphor, like the adjectives, like everything about it was so good. And I thought, like, I don't think I could ever write that well. So I actually emailed him my opening story to my book that I was putting out, and I just said, could you take a look? You don't have to rewrite. You don't have to say anything. Could you just take a look and maybe give me any type of feedback? And if you just say this is garbage, start over, that's fair too.
Yeah.
And he actually like crossed out some words, rewrote some things, added the adjective to set the stage. And it actually like went into the book. And so I think just the process of continuously doing it and then not being afraid to ask for help or ask what others think. You're not always going to get the response you want, but it's like that thing about like, can't be afraid to fail. Like you can't be afraid to be embarrassed that your writing isn't that good. And maybe somebody could help you. And that's how you actually get better.
Yeah. Couldn't agree more. That's absolutely true. And I think, like you said, recognizing that it's important is step one. And then step two, I feel like is actually becoming a fan of that thing. We're talking about writing. You could apply that to anything. If you want to get better at management or creative or any design, anything, being a fan and actually just listening, watching, learning by other success, watching other successful people. This is like, I can relate that to music too. Like just learning, but learning music for me was about imitation initially, like I want to sound like John Bonham on the drums. So like I would just study John Bonham and I would, there's nothing wrong. I feel like a lot of people don't want to admit that, like, oh, I don't copy anybody, or I don't, I just, everything comes from me and I don't look at anything else. And that's kind of a bunch of BS. I think everything builds on the past, and not being afraid to look at other people's success and find out what they did right and learn from that, take it in and apply that to your own stuff.
Exactly. Like marry it with yours. Like I played quarterback growing up and in college.
Yeah.
Dan, and one of my big things was I loved great play action passers, because as a quarterback, you don't block. So I'd think like, how can I block? And one of the ways I could block was creating great hands and being able to fake really well. And it was always one of the biggest compliments when people thought like I couldn't find the ball. And so I would study. I'm from Ohio, so Boomer Esiason, the lefty, was actually a great play action passer, and Peyton Manning became one, and Aaron Rodgers has become a better one. And I had this love of little things like that. And at the beginning though, I was literally copying them exactly. It was like verbatim. Exactly like Boomer. That's how I would do it, just right-handed. And I think that applies to everything. Yeah, whatever it is take the bits and pieces from the people you admire, you look up to, things that you value. And sometimes even copying it word for word. Like this is a real writing exercise that people do, where they will just literally handwrite the exact words that they're reading from a book, because that act kind of gets their mind going and gets you going in the process of like writing great prose. Whatever that is for you, I think that can be done, and not to be afraid to study and learn, and even copy and mimic from some of the greats as you're learning.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, that's great. I mean, yeah, and that it does apply to everything. I mean, that's how I learned to design, and how I learned to build websites. Back when I started, it was like, and one of the things great about websites is that you have the source there to play with, literally like taking something that you already like and then looking at the guts of that and just, changing one thing. Oh, that's how that affects that. And that, yeah, absolutely. Don't be afraid to take from other folks. That's how we learn. That's how like styles evolve and are created.
So I want to hit one more from 20 bits I learned about design, business, and community, or your book, which, by the way, and I know I already emailed you about this, and I've emailed with the printer of it about, and even gotten price quotes and everything for my next
Oh,
book,
excellent.
which
Great.
is not even close to ready, but it's just like knowing that's there, and I love his site.
Yeah.
So the book
Great
is
printout.
actually really beautiful in its own right. The
Oh,
look,
thanks.
you can tell like there's careful, like I just love details, and I love someone who cares about the details of like
Yeah.
how the actual page feels, the
Yes.
typography. Obviously you've talked about this a lot.
Yep.
The little drawings. I actually work with an illustrator when I give keynote speeches, Dan, who I have, when possible, I have him stand on stage with me and he draws pictures of what I'm saying.
Oh, wow. In real time.
In
Oh,
real
man.
time. His name is
That's
Brandon
great.
Black. I love Brandon. It's one of the coolest things. You'll see people that'll look at me briefly. Sometimes if I have a visual slide, they'll look at that and they'll look at Brandon. They're all like, it just is like explosion of their senses. And I think that's
brilliant.
awesome. Yeah,
That's
it's
a
fun.
great idea.
So anyway, it reminded me of it, and I actually emailed Brandon. I said, hey, look at this book. I sent him a copy of the book. Look at this book. I kind of want to do something like this because it looks really good.
Awesome.
Can you
Awesome.
share, like, to close about this book,
Yeah.
20 Bits? I learned about design, business, and community. Your process of saying, like, of caring deeply about literally everything that goes in this. You didn't just say, here's the content, I'm handing it off to somebody else to print this thing and then we'll sell it. But like the feel of it, everything about it, you can tell that you had a say in. Can you talk about your thought process there and why that's so important?
Yeah. Well, thanks. First of all, thanks for the kudos there. For me, the creation of it is the fun part, and that's the part I really love. I think that oftentimes I'll get like this image in my mind of, I visualize in my mind like how is it, I want to share what I've learned, and here's the format, but how is that going to look in someone's hand? How are they going to feel when they read it? And that was just as important, and not only just important, but like the fun part for me was like the creating and the choosing the cover and choosing the paper and the fonts and laying it out, and like that. I wanted to learn all those aspects of making a book, even though it seemed kind of overwhelming at the time. It was like I had this vision of what I wanted it to be, and I kind of wanted to follow it through. Um, and part of it is like control freak, I guess, in a way. Like, I've worked with other publishers in the past, and everyone does a fine job, but I think I wanted to do something a little more personal, and in order to do that, I kind of had to take control over all those different steps, and feel good about every aspect of it, not just the content, but because that's, for me, that's the fun part. The building is the fun part, and then once it's done, I actually have the problem of, like, I love building things, and then like marketing them and pushing them is the tough part for me. And so I feel like I'm already thinking about the next thing. I'm already on to the next project and visualizing that, and that's just the fun part for me. It's just the building of it.
Yeah. Well, I guess one final question, Dan. What's then since you are a builder, you're a maker, what's next for you?
Yeah, I mean, good question. I think that right now is an interesting time in the world, and there's so much unrest, and a lot of I try to look at the positives. I try to see positive things moving forward in the world, and so I'm doing a lot of listening and learning on that side of things. But I'm also trying to, with those changes, it does affect business and how you operate a business and how you promote a business, and I think those are interesting things that that are heavy on my mind right now. And I feel like the businesses that are going to be successful post pandemic, and sort of a equal rights movement that's happening, is like companies that are going to be flexible, and and not dig their head in the sand and be like, well, let's go back to the way things were. I feel like you're seeing companies be successful in pivoting and being flexible about how they run their businesses. And I feel like that's been heavy on my mind in terms of what I'm creating. And it's affected, like, I recently learned how to make fonts. That's like one like very specific example of like what's next for me. Like learning how to build fonts and create fonts has been amazing, and like another learning experience. I had no idea how to do this, and had a vision of what I wanted, and kind of made it happen. And I think I'll do more of that. It's sort of like, how can I create things that how can I create things that I can share with the world that are easier to create remotely and distribute remotely, and all those different factors that go into the different world we're in right now. So more adapting, I think, and flexibility, and I'm always going to be making things, though, that's for sure. Like, bottom line is I'll never stop creating stuff that I want to see in the world, and hopefully other people want to see as well. That's the goal.
Yeah, absolutely. I know I'm one of them. Big fan of like your what you've made, what you're making, and your humble nature too. I think that's a big added bonus. So I just want to say, Dan, thanks so much, man, for investing your time with me today. It was a lot of fun to get a chance to deconstruct and understand your line of thinking about the way you go about your work. And you can tell you're a really thoughtful, reflective guy. And I think those are the type of people I personally like to surround myself with, so we could have regular dialogue. And I'd love to continue this as we both progress, man.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Thanks so much, Ryan. I agree. I think talking about things, like we were talking about writing, talking about things too, helps you solidify your opinions about things and your methods. And so it was a pleasure. It was great talking with you today.
True. Oh, by the way, where would you send viewers, listeners to learn more about you online?
Yeah, I mean, probably the easiest place is SimpleBits.com. That's kind of been my home base for forever, and that kind of links to all the different things I'm up to. So that's probably the best place to go. That's got if you want to contact me there, you can. If you want to follow me, they'll have links to everything on SimpleBits.
Yep.
And that's probably the easiest.
Love it. All right. Well,
cool.
Thanks again, Dan, man. It was great talking with you.
Yeah. Thanks again, Ryan.
All right,
appreciate it.
See ya.